and I'm joined by three of my favorite season 3 floor contestants, Alex, Laurel, and Mike. Mike will be joining us later. So far, in this season, Brian has camped out and collected money, but this week, camping becomes a nail biting game changer. More name the celeb slides, but Latin celebs proved a challenge, and the floor consolidates further as we pass the halfway mark. Welcome to Reality Redux and our recap of The Floor, Season 3, Episode 7. Hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Hi, great. Thanks for
Hey,
having us.
I'm thrilled to have you. I know that folks from season 3 have a recap podcast as well. It's a little bit of a different flavor, but I also recognize that you and your castmates are in high demand. And as Laurel mentioned off camera, that they have full dance cards this season as they're trying to, make everybody happy. So I'm appreciative that I got in touch with you early enough to get you on the show to chat with us about how things are moving along. And Alex, last week we would have loved to have had you. I know that you had a way more interesting and important personal engagement. So this week we may spend a little bit of time up front just talking a bit about your run on episode 6. And Laura, we haven't seen you yet, except being a super awesome Best Supporting Actress nominee as you float about the floor, hugging and high fiving folks. And of course, Mike was part of the last duel of this week, and we're hoping to chat with him in a little while. So I appreciate you guys joining us. And Alex, I want to pick your brain just a tiny bit
absolutely.
about, you know, Brad's not here. He's hoping to be on another time to spar with you. We play good cop, bad cop on this show mostly. I, being a floor family member, really rein in my critique because I know what that whole experience is about. But sometimes I let some stuff fly, and so I'm going to try to adopt some of that tonight. Last week, some folks were critical of your choices and decision making. Particularly going back to the floor maybe and not continuing this week a plan to push ahead.
Sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I know hindsight's 2020. Have you had any thoughts watching it play back that shoulda, coulda, wouldas? Any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brad is a very lucky man that he's not here tonight, I would say. But
Ooh.
and thanks for letting me come on this week. Like you said, so last week during filming was actually my 5th wedding anniversary. So we were
Congrats.
out to dinner um, during taping last week. But so here's where I'm at because I understand some of the points he was trying to make, but from my vantage point, let me try to walk through why I think what I did was a good strategy, and actually why this week's episode to me confirmed that it was a good strategy. So, I'm randomized in season 2, in episode 2, and I do the sushi duel, and then I go immediately back to the floor. And the reason for that is I always felt like if you couldn't get a time boost in one go, then you might as well like not. And at the time, the way the board looked, I only felt confident about 2 of the duels surrounding me, and that's not enough to get a time boost. So I did the one I was obligated to do, and then I came back to the floor.
Smart man. I would think that's the perfect move.
Yeah, and then the mistake I made, and Laurel maybe can keep me honest here. I think I was a little intimidating, and I think people were scared of me. And I realized very quickly that no one was going to challenge me in natural history. And I started twiddling my thumbs because The Real Housewives, the thing I wanted to do more than anything in the entire world, was next to me and I couldn't do anything about it. And so I started like panicking a little bit. In episode 4 where we did the hand raise, I
Mhm.
raised my hand and actually, and we did a whole producer interview about this, and that like storyline was cut, but I was the only person who had already dueled who had raised his hand.
And I didn't
Yeah.
know that till you shared this with us recently.
Yeah, I was because I just wanted to get back out there, but a lot of people really wanted to play it safe. I gave Chef Steve some good natured ribbing about that, that he didn't do it, and then also of course one of the contestants had talked a really big game, but then at the end of the day didn't raise his hand, even though he said all he wanted to do was play, and so that was
N-
funny too. But
Did Laurel, did you raise your hand? I don't think you did.
I did. I
You did.
did.
Okay.
I've gotten many kudos from friends of mine saying, "Look at you raising your hand."
Oh, I'm really proud of you. I must have just missed it as the
Well,
camera was, panning to the
I
different
will
folks.
say they had us put our hands up and hold them up for a while, and my arm got tired. So when the camera pans to me, I'm just like this because my arm is just tired.
And we're so used to seeing you high five everybody. I
Yes.
probably just assumed you were high fiving Alex for him putting his hand up. But
Yeah.
so, that you make a good point, Alex. Not many people who'd already been in the hot seat and then return to their safe zone, realizing that they are not going to play again until everybody's been randomized, or until people come up adjacent to them. And you were eager to hit up Real Housewives at that point. If you'd been picked, you would have done that. Would that have been your move?
If I had been picked, I would have then gone for that whole time boost
Right.
strategy.
Okay.
My strategy would not have changed had I been picked in episode 4 as what I did in episode 6. I
Gotcha.
think the duels themselves would have been different. I think it would have been kitchen appliances, sports films, and something else to get me there. But that didn't happen, and so episode 6 comes around, and I have another opportunity because Bradley challenges Kimberly, and Kimberly wins. And Kimberly and our corner got incredibly close. We were definitely the closest corner of
Yeah,
the
I'm going to say season 2 felt the same way. I think you and I have spoken about that corner energy. There's something about that region of the floor that I think breeds solidarity.
Yeah, we were just very, very close. And I was trying to figure out who would actually maybe ever challenge me. I knew Tony wasn't going to. I knew Ira wasn't going to. I knew Jamila wasn't going to. Bradley and I were like besties. Like we really didn't want to go up against each other. So I really had to talk to Kimberly and be like, hey, listen, if you ever want to come against me, it's not going to be as hard as you think. It's probably not going to be name specific dinosaurs. There were like one or two, but
Sure.
and to her credit, she acquitted herself, I thought, pretty well in that duel.
Yeah.
And kind of went out admirably on a high note. She had some great one-liners and stuff like that, and she won a duel. So that was the first step in my plan. Was I had to convince someone to do it, because if I wasn't going to do it, someone else was going to challenge Ira. That duel was not going to be very good.
Yeah,
And
you live for that. You live for that moment. Like when you're on there and you have to pick a goal and you're like, well, if I don't win 250K, if I don't unseat Brian, if I don't this, I don't want to go out just defending natural history. I want to go out owning my favorite category on the floor. So it makes perfect sense.
And I was really happy. Listen, I got natural history because I worked at the Natural History Museum in New York for 4.5 years. I helped produce 35 books about natural history topics for children and adults. I was definitely familiar in it, but it wasn't like a passion of mine.
Yeah.
I was really interested in popular culture and that sort of thing. The topic that we had actually really pitched to the network, and natural history was like the second topic, but the topic we pitched was D-list celebrities. And so that was what I wanted to, that kind of thing, and the Housewives were a big part of that, right?
Well, if you're a fan of Bravo Celebrity at all, and you're Andy Cohen, that's a fantastic category to get. I have to say, as somebody who is currently on Reality Redux, recapping the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, shocked that there were no Real Housewives of Salt Lake City represented.
Shocked, because it's the
shocked.
best. It's the best
It is.
of the franchises.
Hands down, bro. I agree with you.
There must have just been some licensing reason for it. That's the only thing I can guess.
It's got to be because it had been in production by that point. By the time
but
they created
for
by
multiple
a
seasons.
couple years at least. So
Yeah, the Jen Shaw stuff had happened.
Yes.
The Monica Garcia stuff had
Yes.
happened. Yeah.
Yes.
So once I got the ball, I immediately went into the plan that you saw. And my plan was always going to be win 3 duels. And at this point, I thought I could. And then take the risk against Ira. I went onto the show thinking I could actually win the show. And I have been surprised. Most people who went on the show, and I don't know about your season, I think would say they did not go onto the show with the expectation that they could win the show. I actually did go on the show thinking I had a good shot of it, a better
I
than
think
average shot of it.
I think that's a pretty accurate. And Laurel, Alex, you two, and me, we are what I would consider civilians for the most part. I know Alex has been on a game show before, right? Weren't you on Jeopardy, or you had some experience in game show life, but it wasn't your
Yeah.
career. You're not a career habitual game show guy, nor are you, to my knowledge, an influencer. With a quarter of a million people, and you're not on a cruise ship doing entertainment. In other words, there were lots of folks on our I'm maybe I'm just green and completely naive, but I thought everybody on the show was going to be a civilian like me who just wanted a shot at winning money and had studied enough and felt capable and not totally doofusy that we might actually make a run for it. And then to find out that maybe half of the folks were just there kind of just to be there and have fun. And I don't fault them for that at all. I mean, they wanted exposure, they wanted an opportunity, whatever it was. So like you, I'd say half of us were gunning for the whole thing, like strategizing to make it. And others, I think, wanted just more screen time and to make friends and just have a great week filming. And I think it's great that they did. But yeah, I do think that it wasn't an overwhelming number of regular folks. I think there were people who had been in entertainment or entertainment adjacent that surprised me more. I guess I was naive to that. I didn't expect that mix.
Yeah.
Mike is just joining us. Mike, thank you for making the effort. We're just letting Alex give us a little bit of a clue into what happened last week, since we didn't get to talk to him before we go in to the breakdown of the duels, which we'll move on to here in just a moment. But I think, Mike, I know you are an arcade claw machine nut, but I don't think you're a game show veteran, are you? Have you been on a series? Okay. But did
No.
you go on the floor expecting you could win?
I thought it would be competitive. I am
Yeah.
a trivia guy. I'm a gamer.
Yeah.
So, I was expecting to at least be able to compete for an episode or two, if not make it all the way to the end.
Yeah. And I think, Alex, I think your strategy and the way you've just described, you were trying, I think, to balance personal goals, personal excitement, personal missions in the moment with an overarching sensibility of like, let's keep this whole game in perspective because
Yeah.
we do have a shot. And Laurel, we haven't gotten to see you duel yet, but you're in that really pivotal spot where you know it's coming. Like the quadrants are growing and they're encroaching, and pretty soon your island in the middle is going to be just as vulnerable. Did you enter the floor with a sense of, I could take this whole thing if I play it right, and if the cards are dealt to me in the right way? Because I do think everybody has to respect the fact that you can't really have a strategy that's your own, because there's so many things outside of your control that your strategy could go out the window on day one when you don't get the placement you thought you would have on the floor, or you're next to somebody you didn't expect to be next to, and all of
Yeah.
that. But notwithstanding,
I definitely thought there was a chance. And especially, so when I applied for the floor, I had no idea what I was applying for. And then I watched the first season. I was like, well, this is fun. And I feel like I could, sure, I could maybe do this. I will say, my producer in one of our intro calls asked me about what my strategy would be. And I talked about what my personal strategy would be when I was dueling. And, and then he was like, but what about your strategy for gameplay? And I was like, what now? And so I will admit, I did not have much of a strategy because I kept hearing people talk about the strategy they had planned out. And then within 2 duels, their strategy was just
well, yeah.
dead in the water. And I was like, why would I spend all of this time figuring out if X happens, then Y happens, and Z happens, and I go back to it, when there's so many things that could make that null and void. I mean, I'm not going to say what my results were, but I don't regret not spending a lot of time on strategy.
Yeah.
Also,
I could just see the producers now, like listening to you, and they've got their notepad, and they're like, "Naive girl next door." Check.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
you checked the box of the cast.
a
My
100%.
I think there's a reason for listeners who are just tuning in here. Laurel and I are floor twins, which means that we have the same space, number 48. But I also think we're probably very similar, in personality maybe, or the way that we auditioned, because I was out to win, but I think I said to them, "Oh, I don't know if I could win. I think I could. I'm not a dummy, but I know I can win friends. So my plan is just to go to meet new people and walk away with friendships. And if I get cash, that's great." But that was my plan, and I did. I accomplished friendships. I didn't make money, but at the end of the day, everybody, I think, had their own reasons for being there and their own metrics for winning. I've talked about this before and not terribly at length, but I suffered from agoraphobia and high anxiety disorder for most of my life. And fear of travel was a real thing. Fear of crowds is a real thing. And for me, just getting there and not bailing on the trip was a win, right? So like every hour I lasted was another victory. And I do think for people watching, they may say people are afraid to go against Brian. People are afraid to lose. People are afraid to challenge. But what I was afraid of was leaving, not losing. Like I was afraid of leaving all these new friends. I was afraid of walking off that podium and not getting to say goodbye. I mean, I was just the sappy sucker of the show. But that was my thing. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to lose. I just didn't want to leave. So it was kind of a weird feeling. And I'm sure you all had that same sense of community for a lot of you.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
I call it like summer camp meets kind of The Bachelor, in that like you're only spending time with all these people. You're kind of cut off from the outside world, but not really. And no one else knows what your experience was like but those core people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's why I think this Flormalie that, you know, we've all formed over 3 seasons, and I hope will continue to grow as they continue to produce the show, is a real gift, right? Just getting to know people who have this kind of shared secret. I think it's kind of nice. So I want to get through some of the episodes because we are a recap show, or the duels rather. I've made some notes, of course, and we're going to walk through. I just want to ask some of your opinions about how they went down. Some obviously were more exciting than others. Some were more nail biters than others. But we're gonna get through those, and then we'll talk about the last duel last night, which is you know one of the reasons I'm glad Mike was able to join us. And Laurel, because you haven't been up there yet, I still think that the way you're sensing the energy and listening to the other people and getting a sense of, you know, what's going to shake out here, you know, is the action going to swing back over by Brian? If you get randomized, are you going to try to take on a whale and try to guarantee 20K at the end of an episode? Is your strategy at this point in episode 7 to just hold your breath and hope that you're not even picked until episode 12? So I kind of want to hear some of that as we go too. But obviously, you know, last week we had Steven, who won, and that I thought was a fantastic duel, to be fair. It was a lot closer than I think most people expected, and I think Steven was sweating a bit, which I think is good. You know, it's nice to see people just, you know, really pull a good victory out of that. But he decides to go back. Understood. He's in a corner, for crying out loud. You know, he's got a really nice little happy space up there. But I got to ask you guys, he keeps talking about his coach. It keeps coming up. My coach told me, and you know, Heidi and Brad and I were talking about this. I was talking about this with friends. I was like, what's this coach? And gosh, is that another side hustle I can have? Can I be a floor coach? Like, is that a thing? So talk to me. What do you know about that, if anything?
Yeah.
So his coach is his husband. And his husband has like a master's degree in like game theory or something like that. He's a game designer. Both Chef and his husband like switched careers. I don't know, within the last 5, 6, 7 years, and so that's what it was. Is so his husband and him were syncing up and putting into practice concepts of game theory, and so I think Chef maybe wanted to play a little more aggressively, but his husband was like, no, like, I have science behind me to say that you're doing the correct thing.
All right. So I'm going to start calling my partner my coach now too, because he just, you know, he bought a box of periodic table flashcards off Amazon, and just on our date nights would just throw them out at me. So now I'm just going to call him coach, now that I know that's
there you go.
I mean, we're gamers too, don't get me wrong, but it's nice. He's got a strategist on his side, and it's nice that he was listening to him in the heat of the moment.
And it was certainly intimidating to us at the time when he's like, you know what, my coach said. We were all like, a coach? And then later on, we're like, oh, it's your husband. But he's a game theory guy. Okay.
Well, I don't, you know, the show has already completed filming, so we're not like spoiling it for any of the other competitors. But sorry, Steven, I guess now, you know, folks know that, you know, your husband is your coach. That's great. I love that. I love they can work together. It's a beautiful thing. All right. So he goes back, fine and dandy. Randomizer picks up Baron. Now, Baron is Mr. Marvel, as Rob has dubbed him, and he does not take long to just go, yeah, Priscilla, it's you, let's go. There's none of this hemming and hawing. Now, I know during actual filming there was probably a lot of talk, but, you know, the editor's slice and dice.
Not really.
I actually don't think so.
There wasn't.
Oh, there wasn't?
That was pretty live.
Right for it? Okay. Great. Well, we got Backyard Games. A little bit of ho-hum. I got to say, I'm shocked that Jarts did not make it. But if you grew up, as I did, in the 70s and 80s, you are familiar with Jarts, the terrifying, fatal game of throwing metal missiles at each other. It was banned by the Consumer Protection Agency, sadly.
Wow.
It was a game. It was a life or death game, literally. But it didn't show up. I thought that was kind of funny. Other things did. Were there some slides you guys were surprised by?
I I got when I used to live in Washington D.C. and social sports are really big there, and I was in a bocce league that played 2 to 3 times a year, like summer, spring, and winter. I guess maybe fall, who knows? And I was thrilled. I had never played bocce before, never heard of bocce, and I was thrilled to see bocce show up because
Yeah.
I'm a bocce just advocate. So
That's awesome. Well, Amy Wilkinson, who was on season 2, and she was next to me on the floor as a champion bocce player. She was wearing her bocce championship pin on her outfit in
oh my
season
gosh,
2.
I love that.
So if you rewatch it, you'll have to reach out to her. She's fabulous. Did you say DC? Washington,
Yes.
DC?
Yeah.
See, I grew up in Washington, DC. We are twinsies.
We are twins. We
Laurel,
are twins.
we will
Yes.
talk about this off camera because
Yeah.
I think we got more unpacking. Okay, I was a little shocked with the bubble wand. Not gonna lie, I think anything you do alone doesn't count as a backyard game. But I know
Yeah.
they were kind of stretching. I just figured we needed a competition to be a game.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's a
Like
pastime.
butterfly net. I was like, how is this a game?
Say the
Yeah.
same thing about tree swing, tire swing.
Tire swing. Yes.
Yeah, because the butterflies aren't fighting back,
Yeah.
right? I mean, at some point, where's the competition there? They just
I was
these
like,
poor
who
little things.
catches the most butterflies?
I
Yeah.
guess. But it was fine. It was recognizable. They played it pretty well. Baron obviously goes back. Don't blame him. He wants to defend Marvel. No worries. And then we get Cassie, aviation, and I think she is a flight attendant. I remember
is.
seeing, right? Okay, so that makes sense. I see how they pulled that category. She's got right there. She's wearing cowgirl boots, for crying out loud. She has her kickers on, and we're like, this is it. She's going for Brian. Let's see what happens. And she doesn't. She swivels and hits up Jay with Congress. What were your thoughts when that happened? Was that unexpected?
My understanding of the situation, and I'm always happy. I don't want to speak for other people, and if they want to correct the record, please do. I believe she wanted to feel maybe confident with like a warm up round beforehand, which I because you do have an advantage in dueling again and again and again
Yeah,
and again.
momentum is a thing, for
And
sure.
so I do think she wanted that, and her and Jay had gotten very close, and so I do think she had been paying attention to Congress and as part of her study. So it made sense to me. I also and we can talk about this. One of the things Brad dinged me for last week is that I didn't go after Brian. After I, when I could have, or I used my time boost on not that. And I personally think the 20K is not worth pursuing. I think if you look at seasons 1 and 2, anyone who has ever won the 20K has not won the show. And
Right.
because I thought that I could win the show, and after beating Ira, I thought, and potentially it does happen. I'm not giving anything away. I thought I would win the show, and so to me, pursuing that big space, I think is a mistake. And I don't know if Cassie had that similar strategy or not, but like, it's a mistake. The target gets on your back.
Yeah.
Mike has a target on his back right now. What
Yeah.
helps Mike is that he's tied.
Yeah.
And what helps everyone is that our whales are way smaller than your whale was at this point in the
Yes.
season, which I believe was Virginia.
Yes.
And so, but I don't blame Cassie for not pursuing that, because I don't think it's worth going for the 20K unless you kind of like have no choice. But in my case, I had a choice, and in Cassie's case, she has a choice as well.
Yeah, I think it gets to the point that it's beneficial if you have a category that is intimidating to others that you will hang on to, that will provide a shield. And if the whale you're going after has recently inherited the category they have, or you feel like you've got an edge because they haven't had time to prepare. But even then, you've decided at that moment that you're going to sacrifice a greater chance at the bigger pot. And for some people, that's fine. They're like 20K, good to go. In hindsight, would I have gone for 20K? No. because I really did want to stay. I wanted to stay and play. So I think everybody's different, but you're right. There's no reason you had to. I think it just makes for TV because they've got Rob saying, you guys are letting him just take all this money. And that's a little disingenuous. Nobody has the power. The randomizer is selecting opportunity. So it's not like the whole floor has just sit back on their hands and, twiddled their thumbs going, oh gosh, we don't want to do anything. But I guess we're going to see now, because as these consolidated spaces take over, there's less and less room for people to hide, and people will need to make moves on those bigger spots, like Laurel. Hopefully not soon. Hopefully you have time to sit back.
Well,
We'll
I will
see.
say, I was thinking back, and I had texted my boyfriend, I think it was before this episode, where, so I have, I'm the crown. I have right in front of me Haunted Places, which I feel decent about. I have next to me Critters, which I tried to study for, and it was too broad. Everything looked the same. It was bad. I had Ashley behind me with Beyonce songs, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to be on Beyonce songs. I'm like, if I get randomized, I have to go after Brian. That's the only, I'm from Texas. I can take on Rodeo.
Yep.
Maybe
Yep.
I can take it on better than him. Who knows?
Yep.
But I texted the most dramatic thing to my boyfriend, which is, I think I'm about to be a sacrificial lamb. You saw it didn't happen, but I was just
Seriously.
but yeah, I was like, I'm running out of options over here.
Yep.
And if I feel halfway confident about like what Brian's category, I'm just gonna have to take him on.
Just have to go for it, because at least I would say that too then, Alex. I would say that I would go for the whale if I felt it was my least, path of least resistance. If I felt I had no shot with my adjacent singles, why would I go for them? I'd have to go for what I thought I could win. And every time, I think a good player goes for what they think they can win at the end of the
Absolutely.
day. So I think I'm going to talk about Rodeo, because that'll be our next duel. And you'll have to tell me, Laurel, if you thought you would have been competitive. But I've got to say, Congress was interesting. In season 2, we had failed political candidates. And to me, what Congress was for season 3 is what failed political candidates should have been for season 2, instead of folks like Gary Coleman. I'm sorry, that just was a wackadoo category on our end. This one made so much more sense, because almost every single one of those folks ran for president. Not all of them, not Mitch McConnell, of course, not Nancy Pelosi, but a lot of them, especially your 90s folks, Gore and Kerry and Quayle and Jackson and stuff. So I thought that was kind of a deja vu moment for those of us watching. And it wasn't terribly difficult, because it was kind of name the political celebrity, right? Washington, D.C., they say that, it's, what do they say? It's like
Show
Hollywood
business
for
for
ugly
ugly
people.
people.
Yeah, ugly
Exactly.
Hollywood, yes.
So anywho, but then we got to finally, Jay wins that, great. And he says, you know what, this is it. I'm going for Rodeo. And I think maybe like you're saying, Alex, he felt some confidence. He had some momentum. He got some of the first dual jitters out, and he's ready. And so Rodeo, Laurel, you said if you got randomized and you had to go for Bride, would you have won, do you think? Or would you have known most all of those?
I knew, I knew a lot of them. The ones that would have tripped me up were like Bridal, Earnet. Those were two that I definitely would not have had. The other ones, I think I would have said something that they would have accepted. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
We hope, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to know if they've got a list of stuff or not. What about you, Mike, Alex? Any of those tripped you up in Rodeo?
I think for me, just the ear nets one was probably the only one. Everything else I felt pretty good about.
Yeah.
I remember in the moment being like, oh, I could have taken that if
Yeah,
the opportunity was there.
yeah. I didn't know
I-
Earnet either. Earnet, nope.
No, because that was right. That going back to Brad was like, why didn't you challenge for Rodeo? A lot of people were like, why didn't you challenge for Rodeo? I am very confident in my decision. I was also tired. 4 duels in a row is exhausting. And because I thought I was gonna maybe lose to Ira, but I thought it was worth it because of the the fame and the
drama
notoriety.
factor,
Like
yeah.
I'm very popular on like Instagram this week, and I'm like, that's cool. I wouldn't have been otherwise, but I would have lost the rodeo duel. Like I played it last night, I would have actually lost the rodeo duel. So I also am very grateful that I trusted my own instincts
Yeah.
because I would have lost that duel, and I think that would have dulled some of the shine of what I did last episode.
Yeah.
And Brian's territory would have been 8 bigger, so
Yeah.
Mike wouldn't have split in the 10K, and so there's a lot of reasons. But when I was watching it last night, and I felt good. I'm from Houston, grew up going to the rodeo. I felt good about it, and I did study for it a little bit, especially when Brian started getting closer and closer to me. But yeah, no, I would have passed I think like 4 or 5 times, and
It's a nice feeling though to see that, isn't it? Like it's a validation. It's like, oh, thank God, because
Yeah.
you always
Oh,
wonder,
I did
like,
the right
what
thing.
if, what if, what if, and now you know, and you're like,
Now I know.
dodge the bullet, right? Yeah, I think the one I missed obviously was Earnet. We were playing along. We have some season 2 folks. We were live watching together, and I kept saying glove glue because I could not think of the word rosin. I was like, it's a glove glue, and I was like, no, that's not it. But for the most part, I thought it was enough of a pop culture category if you had any knowledge of cowboy life. At least you would have been semi-competitive. You know,
I
there's some
will
things
say-
like Paddock maybe would have caught a few people off guard, but it was, you know, it was pretty good. It was kind of neck and neck. It wasn't a huge blowout. And then Brian, obviously, he's learned go back, go back, go back, and he does. Now he's retained aviation. We'll see how that bears for him in the next episode if he gets challenged again. And then we get another randomizer, and we've got Phil, who's got Song of the Year, right? And he goes for Amanda and Pasta. And this was one of those, you kind of know it or you don't. Like, but if you'd studied, you were gonna do fine. I mean, just look up your top 50 pasta shapes. I think it was tricky, and I want to know what it was like in studio because from our perspective, viewing it, scale and size is key. How was it in studio to like, because fusilli and rotini, crying out loud, they're both curly Q noodles. I mean, one's bigger, fatter, thinner, skinner, whatever. What did you think when you saw it in the studio on the big screen? Was it a problem?
I remember being grateful that it was not me. And watching it last night brought back the memories, bad memories, it turns out, of studying for it. Where you spend a ton of time squinting at your computer screen, like, how many curly Qs is that?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
How tight is the queue? How wide is the queue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It becomes one of those categories going back to last season, like looking at like beans, where it's one of the, you really have to be able to name off a few
Yeah.
that look similar. And
Yeah,
so
and-
like you have to have that knowledge to be able to say linguine, like all these things that look similar very quickly.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's one of those of time. If you can just roll off like 5 names, you know, Cavatappi, Capellini, you know, you're going to hit one, rather than trying to be very thoughtful about how many curls per square inch are in the noodle, right?
So when I
that's
was
kind of-
studying for some of my categories, I actually practiced that way. So I did the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, for example. And what's really interesting is right before when we do the producer briefing, like right before, they said it would all be individual answers. But I had practiced individuals and bands. And there were like a few bands that if I had seen them, I was going to say, what was it? Pink Floyd, The Who, Led Zeppelin. And I was just
Right.
going to say that all as
Right.
one word.
Right.
And because the way the game works, that's fine. And so with pasta, it would have been penne rigatoni, linguine fettuccine, like you would have just
Right.
said both.
Just have
And
them
I think
going.
that's a strategy too, is to like bucket the similar ones, because as long as it comes out of your mouth, it's fine.
100%. Yeah, we had Mick was in front of me last season. He had British Invasion, and again, some of these, like the Crown, are ambiguous, right? If you haven't been given enough information, like my category, based on a true story, people aren't really sure what that entails. And to be fair, I wasn't either. It was a tricky category. But with British Invasion, we're like, is this going to be like war? Is it going to be music? Is it going to be the British Invasion from the Beatles? Or is it going to be like Amy Winehouse and Adele and One Direction? Like, where are they going with this? And so I studied a bunch of the older bands. And like you, I was like, Herman's Hermits, the Trogs, the Who, because they were all white boys with really bad haircuts. And I couldn't tell them apart to save my life. So I think, you know, for folks listening who are trying out for future episodes, it's not a bad strategy to, like you're saying, lump kind together and learn to riff them off, because, you know, it may save you time even rather than passing. So I think you're right. I think pasta went that way too. Then one of those categories where I don't even know if I would know enough Latin musicians to rattle them off. Wow, that was hard. I have to say, with the Latin musicians, to me, I think SNL is going to do another skit. If you all saw the SNL skit about basically Americans don't know black people, let's be honest, Latin musicians showed most of us that we don't know a lot of Latino performers either. And that was hard. I'm really glad I didn't do all that. I certainly would have avoided it as much as I could. I just felt impotent with that category on a personal level. And, you know, I listened to lots of music, but I could not visually identify anybody except Menudo. And that's because I'm a child of the 80s. So how did you guys feel about that? Did you do better than you thought you might?
I actually would have killed that one, and I was surprised There are a few
Laura
categories
was
on the
surprised
board.
too. Laura
I'm
was-
surprised too.
There are a few categories on the board that I thought that studying helped. That one, female country stars, Star Trek, rappers, really a lot of the music categories, sports MVPs. My preparation in those categories, which they were all so far away from me, so once we knew where we were standing on the board, I kind of stopped studying those. But when the Latin music category came up, in my head, I think I only passed once. I think I would have done really well in
That's
in that
amazing.
category.
That's amazing. I think I knew Tito Puente, the famous band leader.
Of course.
I knew Menudo. I knew Ricky Martin, Christina
Yeah.
Aguilera.
You knew Desi Arnaz, I'm sure.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Ricky. Yeah, I said Ricky Ricardo. And I was
I
like,
said
no,
Ricky
Lindsay
Ricardo,
Arnaz.
too.
But a lot of the others, oof, I had no idea. But to be fair, I didn't know. I probably only knew 50% of rappers too, and I think I knew the people from my generation, but not more contemporary Latin musicians. I was lost.
I'm confident that had you been presented with that as an option,
Oh,
you
yeah,
would
I would have studied it.
You would have taken the Sporkle quiz. You
Oh,
would
for
have
sure.
you would have known
For
the top
sure.
the top.
I would have had the
singers.
slideshows in my binder.
Yeah.
Like,
you would have
yeah.
known who Carol G and
Yeah.
Camila Cabello are. You would have figured it out.
But as just a pop culture knowledge moment, I felt my weakness,
Yeah.
and I think that's good. I mean, I think it's good to know that there's moments where it's like, wow, I really need to explore more of that, or I need to get more interested in that, or I need to be more inspired by that, because these are all very interesting categories of intellectual, academic, entertainment, pop culture, like just varieties of knowledge. And I think if you're in this game to win it, you're a lover of knowledge. You're a lover of learning. You try to be a sponge. And I think anytime I find something else I can soak up, I get really excited. But I'm just, wow, I thought that was a tough one. And then we're getting down to the last couple here, and we're gonna have some more fun talking about hunting and camping soon. But then we have, Sifat held her own. She did what Barbie asked, right? Barbie passed off the baton and said, "I want you to run this." She did well. Spark made an interesting choice in that one, though, and I'm sure you all got to hear his rationale, right? I think his point was, he told his wife he was going for the money. That's what he said at the end of the producer cut. But he also preambled that with, I know competition shows are my jam. That's my thing. I totally know that. I don't know a lot of Latin musicians, but I've been trying, so let's try that one. And I was like, I face palmed like audibly. I was like, dude, no, what? Don't roll the dice on this. Like, just don't. And he did. And I felt almost like, well, sorry, maybe he should have gone for competition shows. But hindsight's 2020, and I'm just couch coaching at this point. Did anybody else on there just kind of go, ooh, when Spark went that route? Did you expect it?
Yeah, yes and no. I think he, probably would have been better with competition shows. But also looking at the opponent, his opponent would have been better with competition shows as well. Whereas with Safat, she's just inherited this category. She hasn't been studying it as long. So looking at it from a one-on-one standpoint, I think he had a better shot going for Latin musicians if he had any sort of knowledge base.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Who else was around him, though? Who else could he have chosen? Because he wasn't on an edge. I don't think they went over him talking about anything but competition shows, and then he chose Latin musicians. Can y'all remember who he was adjacent to? Was he near oceanography?
I can
No, that was all he
secretly Google it real quick.
I think he was close to languages. I know he
And
and
punctuation, maybe?
Laura. Oh, maybe punctuation.
He was touching languages.
Yeah, because he and Laura went
Competition
for it.
shows. Punctuation. I don't know. Who had that big territory at that point? Was
That's
that
what I was trying to
Safat.
figure
Latin?
out.
That was Latin musicians.
Yeah, that was Safat.
So he really just had Latin musicians, languages, which is our audio category of the
Yep.
season, and competition shows. So he
Okay,
really
so-
had those three choices.
So Latin musicians must have taken two of his edges.
They did, yeah.
Okay, visually I'm seeing that now. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, that's tough. I can see that. Okay. And you're right, Mike. That's a great point. Sifat had inherited it, so it was probably not a bad decision. It took him by surprise. I think he thought he would do a little better. And honestly, I think had he passed more quickly in the end, he might have won. Again, you don't know what you're doing up there, but he had the advantage on time. If he had passed, because Sifat had been passing quite a bit at the end as well, she only had one opportunity to pass and it would have been over. And I think he didn't maybe notice the time on the clock, or he might have passed more quickly. But again, in the moment, you're not really looking. I mean, there's 10 million things to look at. I don't blame him one bit for not
Yeah,
seeing
I
the
can't
box.
say anything about that.
No, right? No, you can't. We're gonna get there, bro. Okay. And then right before we get to that one, Mike, we have the rise of Stephanie, or the quick rise and fall of Stephanie. So Sifat decides to stay up there. I think that's probably smart because she just inherited rom-coms. If she hadn't been studying it very long, it's probably better for her to go after something she thinks she can just grab rather than head back right away. And she went for crayon colors. Now this one, I have to say, it was both easier and harder than I expected it would be. I thought, oh golly, I remember having the box of the 100 colors with the sharpener in the back. Anybody remember getting the kind with the
Yes,
built-in sharpener?
that
'Cause,
was
you know,
elite. If you
that
had
was
that, you were the
elite.
most popular kid during art class.
Well, girl, because you had like your knockoff, what was the company? Rose something, Rose Art.
Rose Art.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Rose
Rose
Art,
Art, like the
yes.
Dollar Tree crayons, right? And if you had like Crayola crayons, you were very bougie. And if you had the sharpener on the back, to be fair, I did not have my own brand new one. I inherited one from like a cousin that was like their used box from the previous school year, and I was like, oh, I'm all over that. But still, I got some street cred with my crayon sharpener. But I remember those, and I remember thinking, oh gosh, you know, peach, lavender. Like I'm going through my head, and I'm like, I don't know. It's just going to be name that color. Let's see how it goes. And I was like, uh-oh, it's like the ice cream duel. But then all of a sudden, I'm like, if you know how to rhyme, and you're even remotely intuitive,
Yeah.
and you know your colors, it's not that hard. And I was pleasantly surprised that it kind of flowed. You know, mango tango, it's orange. What rhymes with tango? That's orange. Mango, boom. So I didn't find it as hard as maybe it, I guess it could have been. It was kind of a fun category, I got to say, and one that I think kids certainly could have played along with.
I think it was very studyable. And also, Laurel and I are just about the same age, and I think we're both a little older than Mike. But sometime in our
How dare you tell
child,
everybody that I'm 50? How dare you?
Are you 50, Laura?
No.
no. Everyone just
Look, I'm going to be 52 this year. I thought maybe we were the same age. I was.
everyone just thinks I'm in my 60s or 70s because they've never seen a 39-year-old with gray hair before. But when we were like, I don't know, 10 or 11, Crayola did like an international like name that crayon contest.
Yes.
Yes.
It like dominated my life. I was so invested in it, and so a bunch of those colors came up.
Yes.
Purple Mountain Majesty,
Purple's Mountain. I was going to say
Macaroni
Purple
and
Mountain
Cheese.
Majesty. Yes,
But yeah, I thought it was really studyable, that category.
definitely.
And
It was finite, right? The finite
Yeah,
categories are
yeah.
good.
Yes,
Yeah.
we knew
I
exactly
remember-
what to study for.
Yep.
I remember on the floor thinking that was such an easy category. All of that knowledge has left my brain. And last night, I mean, I would probably have won, but last night I was like, the Banana Mania one, I think I was like, oh, I did not remember that at all.
Well, I remember the crayon controversy when I was coming up, because I guess I'm the oldest of all of us. When we had Flesh, Flesh was a color of our crayon, and that was a big PC, you know, I guess you would just say like it was a huge moment in diversity awareness in crayon culture, if you will, because they're like, this is not the color of all flesh, and that was gone. And then you started to get way more creative colors that were, you know, trying to just be more diverse, more interesting, more fun. And so I think they were drawing off of that. I thought it was fun and inventive, actually, and I'm excited as more seasons come out to see the production really pull into some things that could be, you know, different like that. It wasn't another name the celebrity, right? Which is essentially what the next category was, Tony's. It was another just name the celebrity. You know, I don't think there was anything too earth-shattering or terribly interesting. I think Georgie, of course, people had the expectation she might win just based on the way it was edited to show that she knew, you know, she was a drama kid, theater kid, she knew all of this stuff. And to get stuck on Andrew Lloyd Webber was a little rough, but it is what it is. I still thought it was a decent duel. Any thoughts that you want to share about the Tonys?
can I give a shout out to Mike here? Because earlier in the season,
Yes, I
he
know where you're
talked
going,
about-
and I agree.
He talks about not knowing the Tonys. Our season was full of bluffing, and that was a bluff that Mike did, but we never on camera get the reveal of that bluff. So I just want to give Mike props that
So,
he
Mike,
actually.
you do know Tony Award winners?
I had that one in my back pocket that I was ready to either pull out if I needed to challenge it or to defend at some point.
See, that's
I-
awesome, because I actually was going back to something he said on his first episode, which was that he thought it was famous Tonys, because I'm like,
Mhm.
that would be a fantastic category, because you got
Great
Tony
category,
Soprano,
yeah.
Tony Danza, Tony Tiger. I was
Yeah.
thinking of all the Tonys, and I got super jazzed. But I didn't know you actually were a bit of a closet
yeah.
theater nerd there. That's great.
I made all the jokes about it, but yeah, that could have been, had it played out differently, my Alex moment.
And looking at it, would you have done well in hindsight?
Yeah.
Seeing it play out?
Yeah,
You had it?
I think I would have. I think Georgie definitely has the knowledge there, and she just kind of froze up. But I think seeing the way that duel played out, I
Yeah.
could have won that either way.
It is interesting to see how age factors into, I think, with pop culture. She didn't know Carol Burnett, but then she pulled out Carol Channing, which Carol Channing is just as old as Carol Burnett. So it was just a matter of, I think, mixing her carols up. But there are sometimes, like with political candidates, I think you absolutely saw an age gap with what people could remember or couldn't remember, depending
I
on when they
don't think
grew
it was a
up.
good photo of Carol Burnett. So
No,
that's
no,
another thing.
it's
Sometimes
not.
No.
Um, a lot of the criticism of the Housewives duel was that the photos were
They were
like
not good.
were not really how they looked. I knew the ones that he passed on, but I understand also that those were not great looking photos, and I think
Yeah.
that does happen sometimes. I think
Yeah.
the Kristen Chenoweth photo
That was tough.
in the Tony Awards, I think
Yeah.
I might have passed because that photo did not look like Kristen Chenoweth.
Same. I adore Kristen Chenoweth. We are in the same sorority. I did not know. I gasped when they put up Kristen Chenoweth.
Yeah,
Did not
she
know that
looked
was her.
very cartoonish and exaggerated and bizarre and out of
He
focus.
looked big, and Kristen
Yeah.
Chenoweth is famously
She's
like
tiny.
microscopic.
So
And
tiny.
So I do think sometimes the photo, like you're like, is that Kristen
Yeah.
Chenoweth? It doesn't, But,
That's totally fair, but I'm going to pull a Brad and say Carol Burnett's a redhead. Carol Channing's famous for her platinum wig. At the end of the day,
well,
those two should have
is
been.
Brad going to make that distinction?
That's a good point, Alex. I don't know if you would. I would say that there are other categories we've had not great photos too.
Female country singers.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
That was probably my biggest example. 100%.
yeah,
You're right.
100%.
Okay, so let's drum roll this puppy. All right. Then Stephanie is up there and she's like, I got this. All right, I'm going to go for the money. I'm going to go for the time boost. I'm just going for it. Hunting and camping. Let's go, Mike. And I'm sitting there going, Mike's from Utah. Mike lives near mountains. I bet Mike camped. Between the two of you, I certainly thought you might have had more camping experience or hunting experience. But to be fair, most of this is stuff you can see, when you just go to like REI or a Bass Pro Shop or something. But anyway, I was excited to see it play out. And then you went and gave me a heart attack. For 20 seconds, my heart stopped. And I want to know what the heck went on. And before I get there, what size long john do you wear? Because I'm sending you a
Everyone wants to send me the long johns.
I'm getting you long johns with like the floor logo on the trap door in the back, because you've just got to remember these for the rest of your life. Okay, talk us through Long John Gate. What
To
happened?
be fair, to start off Long John Gate, Long Johns by definition are a two-piece item. It's a top and a bottom. And what was hanging on that clothesline was certainly a one-piece item. So just putting that out there.
So one
There
of
are-
my coworkers today, who is a little bit, he's I think close to 60. He said he wondered if they would have accepted a union suit as an answer.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, probably so.
Y'all, you're familiar with that term. I have never heard of that
Yep,
before.
it
Yeah.
could have been, but we have seen other duels where things are named things that are also named other things, and they don't take
For
the other
sure.
things that are named the things. So we don't know if that would happen.
Yeah.
But fair enough.
did-
You went everywhere.
I
though.
did say onesie.
Onesie was my favorite. Adult onesie. That's absolutely what that was.
I mean, it is a one-piece item.
Yes,
Is
sir.
a
Yes,
is
sir.
an is a hot dog a sandwich? We're gonna go down that route.
Yeah.
Is the Long John a onesie?
His ketchup
Anyways.
soup. Yeah, I know. I got you.
But no, I just completely froze up there, and we've seen plenty of people freeze, not realizing it's their turn. I might be the first one that's froze, forgetting that I was able to pass.
Is that what that was? Because you didn't freeze, really. You just were doggedly
I was just
persistent.
trying to figure out what it was.
Yeah.
Just
Which I
kind of
love that. I
slipped
was
my
like,
mind
good for
that
you,
I
man.
could just pass
Persevere.
it.
But you went through everything, and I thought you were smart. You're like, okay, maybe they're not going for the clothing. It's a hanging line. It's a drawing line. It's a clothesline. It's a zip
Yeah,
line.
see, clothesline
you
had
know.
already been used, so
Yeah.
I realized it wasn't that. This does kick me back to the rodeo duel, though, where I believe it's maybe the first time where they've actually highlighted on the picture what
Yes.
exactly they're looking for.
And I thought
And
that was weird because they didn't need to in some of those.
but I'm
Really.
curious if they will do that more going forward, if that's just kind of the pictures that they found online somewhere were already highlighted.
That's a good point. I have to
Because
Google that.
it would be interesting to see more of those duels going forward where they're highlighting, like, we want the long john, not the clothesline, or we want the trellis, not the flower, that sort of thing.
Right. Right.
Side tangent there, but
That's a very good point, though. I mean, there's a good point. You had two different directions you could go, and you said a lot of words that you anticipated would have been accepted. So then your brain went to, well, that must not be the thing that I should be identifying. I need to identify
Yeah.
the other thing.
And like I said, this is my first time on a game show. I'm not accustomed to necessarily the rules of passing and that sort of thing, even though I do it before. Like, my mind is, I am a trivia guy. I'm a figure it out problem solver guy. So, like,
Yeah.
how do we get to the answer?
Yeah. Well, it took you almost 20 seconds, right? 19 and a half by my count. At this point, I'm sad. I'm sad. Me and my other season 2 friends are sad because we were clearly rooting for you in that duel. And since we first met you, because we just like you and we wanted to see you go further, which is why all 3 of you are here. I invite the people that I like. So I was like, I want to see him go through. I want to see him go through. And I was like, oh, dang it. I just pass, bro, pass. And then, we did it, and it's like, oh gosh, there's just, I never say no way, right? I believe in the Hail Marys. I believe in the impossible. But I really was like, ugh. And then I wonder, do you think Stephanie got a little complacent seeing you struggle for so long and therefore maybe didn't have a sense of urgency? Or do you think she kind of whiffed it in the end? Or what were your thoughts? Did you think you had just lost?
At first I didn't realize, like, I was just in the zone trying to figure out. I didn't realize exactly how much time I had wasted.
Okay.
And then I kind of glanced when the next picture, my next one after she had gotten one, and I saw there was 7 seconds left. I was like, oh my goodness. But in the moment, I kind of didn't realize how far behind I was. And in my head, I was just like, I knew I'd taken a while, and I was ready. Like, I knew I had to go fast. So I was like, everyone has to be 1 or 2 seconds, and I can't pass anymore. I knew that. But then she started to take a while, and I'm like, I kind of agree. Like, did me taking so long kind of rub off on her also taking so long, because she took quite a while to pass on Duck Blind.
Or just thinking she had more time than she did, or didn't feel the urgency that you would in a neck and neck battle.
Exactly. Yeah. I think had she, clearly had she passed a little bit sooner on those, there's a good chance she might have beat me.
Yeah.
I still contend that I've fired off my next answers very quickly
Yeah.
and still ended up with 5 seconds on my clock at the end.
Yeah,
I could have
you
had a
did.
few
You
more answers in
recovered.
me.
Yeah, you recovered really
So-
well. And yeah, I agree.
I think I knew the rest of my category. I came in very confident about it. So,
Yeah.
when I still had 9 seconds, I'm like, I'm still in it. I wasn't counting myself out at all. At my watch party last night, everyone counted me out. I've invited all my friends over, and they're like, oh, you invite us over to watch you lose like this? So, like, it's so disappointing.
But you didn't implode. I think that was the difference for me, is you were still poised. You just were like, I'm not giving up on this. I will figure it out. Not, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Like, you weren't frenetic. So I still held
to
out
me,
that
I
you were gonna pull it.
had 9 seconds left. I'm like, that's 9
Yeah.
answers I can give.
There you
I
go.
was ready for that.
Well, it reminded me of season 1. There was a very similar duel. It was with transportation. I remember because the contestant's name was Angie also, but she was up against Joey. And for those of you who watched season 1, if you remember, Angie just was going, and then stopped. Now, she didn't do what you did and, rattle off things. She just stopped. And it's like she forgot it was her turn, but she almost kind of didn't. And she was just catatonic for like 12, 15 seconds. And Joey, I think, had this confidence, like, oh, she's imploding. This is great. I could win. And it ended up turning around. She won anyway. Angie won anyway. So, I mean, I wasn't giving up on you. I just, you made for good TV. You made us all gap, and that's what we want to see.
Just wanted to make it exciting, And I will say, I didn't freeze up like that in my first 2 duels that I did.
No,
And is it the difference of, hey, this is for 10K there's so much more on the line right now.
Yeah.
There's more pressure. I think that's maybe what happened is the pressure got to me a little bit there for a while.
Well, we're
Also,
gonna see.
this was episode 3 of our first 3-show day.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah,
last one of the day.
it was a long day.
Very tiring.
Yeah.
day as well.
My fiance said that he could just tell we were all out of F's to give by the end.
Oh yeah,
Everybody was-
I
we
remember
wanted to go-
that. Those
Yeah.
were long,
Yeah.
long days,
Yeah.
and it was the last battle, the last duel, the last episode on that day. I totally feel that. Laurel, I heard you mention boyfriend earlier, and now fiance. Has
Oh.
the status changed? Are you mixing and matching? Are we hopeful? What's
Yes,
happening here?
y'all didn't see it. He came in and proposed really quick in between here. You were the first to know.
I wonder, like in the last half hour. Congratulations, Mazel Tov to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So speaking of pressure, and this, we're in the second home stretch of this. Laurel hasn't been touched yet. She got a little more high five, best supporting actress screen time, as we mentioned. I'm wondering if you're coming up here soon, and I'm really anxious to see what happens. I prefer you not be randomized. I prefer somebody challenge you because I really want to see you play the crown. But I guess we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Let me ask you all, of course you're predicting that you win because there are no spoilers here on the recap episode. So let's just say if for some reason you were unable to win, say you won and then the Miss Universe, you're unable to live up to your obligations as the floor super champion and you have to give the money to someone else, who do you think would be the best deserving candidate, or who would you predict for winner this season?
Oh.
If not you, then who?
So, and I really went back to the floor on episode 6 thinking I was going to win. And like I said, maybe I do. Stay tuned, please. Having said that, the person who I thought would be the one to win if I didn't win was Tony.
Okay.
I got to stand next to her for a lot. Since episode 2, I've been standing next to her for 5 episodes now, and she's 23, so her brain is still developing. So she's fast at stuff, right? She's
Yeah.
not limited, but by our old people.
She's not menopausal, just putting that out there.
Exactly.
That's a real
And-
handicap.
And she's just so impressive to watch. I'm just such a fan of hers, and I wanted to win, and I wanted to take her out, and I kept trying to get her to come for me so I could do that, but
Well, maybe we see both of you in the finale.
maybe
In the final duel. But yeah, she's a friend of the show. She's been on twice. We like her very much too. So
Yeah.
I think Tony's a great candidate. I really do. It's a good choice. Laurel, what about you?
I not to just be same, but I would co-opt. She is while being such a nice, warm, welcoming person, is such a formidable opponent on the floor. You felt like there was no topic she was not going to win at, because her knowledge was just so vast. And Alex said, she's so quick. I still think about the math duel. Probably thought about it weekly since it happened last summer.
Yeah, I saw it triggered me with my dad drilling me in the times table in elementary school. I got to say, it took me a while to get past the feelings. I'm a humanities person, so math was never my jam. But yeah, it was an impressive duel, no doubt. So okay, so if not you, then her. And Mike, how about yourself?
Think I'm looking at him right now. After week 6, I'm looking at Alex over in that far corner, and I think he has a good category. He has a good location, and he has great shields. To get to Alex, you have to either go through Tony, who has a time boost, or you have to go through Brian, who's this big whale. There's not a lot of people that are going to be raring to get through someone to go towards Alex, and he has just that right amount of space where it's a lot, but it's not enough to overcome the whales per se in a lot of senses. So
Yeah.
I think he's pretty safe. So from maybe episode 6 on, Alex was one person that I was definitely looking at. I will say shout out to Kathy, as I'm now been standing next to Kathy for a while, because originally I was next to Garrett, and me and Garrett were chit-chatting a lot and trash talking, and I think annoying Kathy a little bit. But once Garrett was gone and I started just talking to Kathy, just learning again, it comes back to like hearing that person rattling off answers in the back of your ear and knowing what they know, hearing her talk strategy, mapping out areas of the floor. She was one of the best at like, oh, this is predicting what's going to happen. She's like, oh, this person's going to duel that person, and then they would, or she's going to challenge her, and then they would. So from that gameplay standpoint, I thought she might be a sleeper there.
That's a good point. She's gonna be on in a couple weeks, so it'll be interesting. I'll have to tell her your prediction.
I also found out she was also very instrumental in getting Kimberly to challenge me for natural history, which I found out after the fact.
I heard that too, because she said, "Hey, you took your kid to the museum. I took my kid to the museum. How hard can it be?" I think that makes sense.
So
she was very tuned in
a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I gotta say, at this point, Alex has poetry. And Laurel still has her original category, and Mike has just inherited rom-com. So we're going to see what next week brings to us. I think poetry, because I teach it, is not that intimidating to me, but likely intimidates a lot of folks in a similar way that maybe Periodic Table did or Shakespeare did in season 2. So I do think that provides a bit of a shield, and we're going to have to see how long that lasts. But
what I was excited about with poetry is, of the remaining categories, I feel like it probably was the widest in terms of like there were not finite answers. We knew it to be a fill in the blank category, like that was like told to us, but I mean, it's not 100 crayons, it's not 200 SNL cast members, it is thousands and thousands of lines. And like, what is it? Is it Shakespeare? Is it nursery rhymes? Is it song lyrics? Is it, classic poems? Like we just didn't.
That's interesting that they told you that was fill in the blank, because when we had Shakespeare in season 2, there was no further information given. And that made it very wide open and very intimidating for people.
I do want to share a memory I have, because Alex and I are close to each other on the floor, and we have downtime during filming and stuff, and he's worried about being challenged, and he comes up to me and he says, "Recite a poem to me." So I just start reciting this poem, which I love, an E.E. Cummings poem that I read at a friend's wedding, because it's just like ingrained in my mind.
I carry your heart with me?
It is. It's like carry your heart. And he's looking at me like, thank you, reciting a poem, but also like, there is no way this is going to be helpful for me. I'm like, I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. Anywhere you go, I also go. And he's like, thanks.
Yep. Oh, I love that poem. E.E. Cummings is amazing. He's amazing. Yeah, I am excited for the poetry category. I have to say, I am. Because I agree. It's lots of lines of poetry. I also always try to remind myself, as I'm sure other players know and hopefully viewers know, it's still a family-friendly, relatively general knowledge game show. This is not where you're going to be asked to determine meter and know phrases like iambic pentameter. It is ultimately going to be, these are poems that you probably have come across either in high school or in film or through song lyrics or something to that effect. It could be even something like Cat in the Hat poetry. We don't know, but it's not going to be something that is so esoteric that the average American can't at least know one or two. So I think at that point it narrows it, but it doesn't narrow it, because you're right. How many books does Shel Silverstein write? And how many of us grew up with, Where the Sidewalk Ends and Light in the Attic? And even those books alone, I don't know if you had a Shel Silverstein category, if everybody would know those poems. So you're right. But that's why I think it's a good shield for you, because it is not finite and it's hard to study. So I'm excited to see how long and how far that carries you. So that being said, I guess we'll find out episode 8 next week. We're going to see what Mike decides to do. Is he going to return to the floor? Is he going to mount an attack? Is he going to let Brian continue to have half of 20K and hope that maybe you just have a stalemate? I don't know, but I'm excited to see what happens. So thank you, Mike and Laurel and Alex, for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that you've had a lot of obligations, especially since your season's airing and it's experiencing such a great reception. So I'm really proud to know all of you, and I'm thankful that you took some time to chat with me tonight. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you back here next week to recap episode 8 of The Floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
You bet. You guys
Thanks
hang for 2
us.
seconds. Give me 2 seconds. I want to make sure you've uploaded. There's a little thing that tells me